All right, let's talk maps. Who here has ever used a topo map? Okay, it's actually a good bit of you. Who here consider themselves pretty decent at reading contour lines? Okay, all right, well, that's what we're doing tonight. All right, so we're just going to really quickly cover some basic types of maps, some basic symbols that show up on maps. We're going to spend a little bit of time camping out on topography and contour lines. We're going to briefly cover measuring distances. We're mostly going to skip over declination because Mike's going to talk about that a little bit more in compass. We have a little slide about getting oriented with your compass. So, lots of different types and sources of maps. Usually here with SAR, if we're doing anything official, we pretty much exclusively use SAR Topo and CalTopo. That's because it's just a very powerful program. You can throw lots of different layers and cool overlays and stuff over it. So it's a very, very powerful thing. But some of your more popular ones you might find, oh yeah, so there's SAR Topo. Some of your more popular ones you might find on the shelf in the ranger station or not the grocery store, but like REI. You're looking at green trails and stuff. Yeah.
This is on the test.
This is on the test, yes. Types of maps commonly used. These are types of maps commonly used. Ortho images, that's satellite view. We don't really use navigational aeronautic charts, but feel free to look at that on your own time. Topographic maps is what I was talking about a minute ago. It's where when you look at a map and it's got like all the lines and squiggly bullet spaghetti kind of stuff. That's a topographical map. Computer-generated search maps, that's SAR Topo that we're talking about. Yeah, making up some time here. I have a feeling there's supposed to be an image behind that. But anyway, so when using SAR Topo, I don't know if you can see this. These are three very common markers that we use. This is our one for clue and evidence. This is our little helicopter that we use to mark out LZs. And this is our marker for place last seen, last known location. What's in, what? LZ. LZ, landing zone. Anywhere, I think it's 100 feet by 100 feet, large enough to fit a helicopter into. Yeah. And that's going to be a level, open area, no trees or creeks or ditches or anything like that. Some other things that very commonly show up on maps, you're looking at railways, power lines, creeks, campgrounds, roads, trails. What'd you say, Eileen? Gravel pits. Gravel pits. Contour lines, stations of various kinds, radio towers, lots of those kinds of things are very common that show up on maps. Lakes, oceans, ocean buoys, those kinds of things. Anyway. Oh yeah, here we go. Also churches, airports, highways, lakes, ponds, marshes. Yep. There we go. Here's a very common one that we use actually on every SAR mission. The incident command post, which you should remember from last week. We use that to mark our base of operations for every mission. All of our ICS, NIMS, SAR markers are very, most of the time typically in blue to make them stand out more from maps more available to the public and stuff that we use. So, okay. All right, topographic maps. Moving on to, oh, Devin. Okay, so topographic maps. Topo map is any map which shows elevation represented by contour lines. These here, these are contour lines. And the basic concept is the further apart the lines are, the flatter the terrain is, and the closer together contour lines are, the steeper the terrain is. So you can kind of see an example of that right here. That'll be a little bit more, ooh, that was nice.
Sorry.
That'll be a little bit more of an open area, whereas, say kind of moving down this way, it's going to get a little bit steeper. And that's kind of the basic concept of how topo maps work. Okay. Elevation is usually represented in feet or meters. Yep, so this one's in feet. So what you'll see with contour lines is there are darker lines and there are less unbolded, not as dark lines. So the darker lines represent generally about every 1,000 feet. And you'll want to look at those on each map that you have and verify that each one actually represents 1,000 feet. So the dark lines are 1,000 feet, and then what you do is you subdivide each one of these lines in the middle represents a distance of 200 feet. So if you took 1,000 and divided it by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then it would be 200 feet. So that's what each one of these little lines represents. Okay, does that make sense? Pretty simple, conceptually.
20 or 40 feet.
Yes, this one. Thank you.
Depends on the scale.
Yeah.
The scale's always listed on the map too.
Yeah, and it's something that we do kind of without thinking about it, but every time you get a topo map, just look at those contour lines and understand what kind of a space elevation that you're dealing with those contour lines. Yes, okay, this one is perfect. These maps also may have survey, road, and point information, but may not be up to date for SAR purposes. Can't tell you guys how often we go tearing up a forest road into an area and just encounter gate after gate after gate that are not on the map.
Or road after road that aren't on the map anymore.
Yeah. Roads that on the map, they look like they're used all the time, but you get there and it's a goat track that's covered in fallen trees. Or trails. And something else you'll run into is between Gaia and SAR Topo and All Trails and Green River paper maps and all of those things, you'll find some maps display trails that other maps don't. And so it creates some interesting communication issues when people are talking, there's a trail right there. And so anyways, it's important to all be using the same map. And if you can, get your hands on whatever map the subject was using when they got lost, because it may give you some insight into what they were thinking. If they're using one, yeah. If they're using All Trails. Okay, this is an example of a U.S. Forest Service topo map. You can kind of see a little bit of stylistic difference between the Forest Service and between Cal Topo, SAR Topo. Just two different examples. One thing that's really nice about SAR Topo is the fact that they employ shading to kind of help those steeper areas and ridges and stuff be a little bit more visible, whereas this Forest Service one does not. All what you're seeing there is just contour lines that are closer together. Okay, so any questions about contour lines again? Perfect. All right, moving right along. Orthophotos are commonly known as satellite pictures. And actually this here, if you haven't seen a satellite photo before, this is the same image as this. And so if you kind of, I think this may actually be in your binders too, you can kind of use this image. You know, you see a ridge with a mountain, you see the lake, and you see it dropping down into a valley with a river below. You can kind of use that to help with your understanding of how topo maps work. But anyways, pushing through. Okay, satellite photos are awesome because they help us to get a better idea of kind of the general terrain we're walking into. But what you'll find often is that satellite photos are super blurry and often out of date. Yeah, actually this one's great. Helpful for finding search-relevant land features such as clear-cut areas and tree line. None of that generally shows up on topo maps. So whenever we're planning out a search area, it's always a good idea to kind of overlay your satellite image and help kind of get a better understanding of where your subject may have gotten lost or just some of those kinds of things. So anyway. Road Atlas maps. Not very useful for SAR. That's generally like, I don't know if many of you guys maybe have never even seen an atlas. But they're usually about that big, and they're pretty much, they just show cities and highways. Not very useful for SAR at all because people don't tend to get lost on the highway. Say what?
They show national parks.
They show national parks.
That's
So, planimetric or road atlas maps includes maps produced to primarily show road and street information. They're typically produced by public agencies or land management groups. They generally show some ground features such as major streams and hilltops, and they have relatively good information on the roads managed by the entity creating the map. Road atlas map. Won't do you a lot of good if you get off the line, right? Anyway. All right, topography. So, so the general concept with topography is as the circles or lines get closer together, right, they get steeper. And sometimes you have some that come up into a ring here. And those often will denote hilltops, right? You see how that works? And it can sometimes be interesting figuring out if that is a pit or a hilltop. And the best advice I can give for you there is read those elevation numbers right here, the 5,000, the 4,000. That'll give you an idea of which direction your slope is going, Mike.
Typically, when you get a pit going, they'll have little lines drawn onto the inside of the contour line to indicate that it's going down
Okay.
instead of going up.
Okay, I hadn't noticed that. Awesome. Okay.
Then Ethan,
So,
numbers always go up. So the higher the number, the elevation is going up.
is that how it works? Whoa, whoa, whoa. Anyway, so is this, here we go. There you go. So here's actually a great example. So you can see our lines are growing closer together, and our rings are getting smaller, and you see the numbers are ascending. Thanks, Eric. That's how math works. Up to our summit here on Able Hill. Okay, here's a ridge. You see it represented here by our more ovular contour kind of rings there, growing smaller and closer together. You'll see as these kind of come out here, this may be a ridge kind of heading this way. Yeah, and then obviously we have our three little hilltops there. Versus just a simple hill. Okay. Okay, here we go. You have rings that denote a hilltop and rings that denote a hilltop here. And then you have kind of this area that doesn't have any lines kind of crossing through it this way. And that's generally a good indicator that there's going to be a gulch, a gully, and maybe a seasonal creek. Or if you have a solid blue. Okay. So here's a dotted blue line. So that typically indicates that it's a seasonal drainage or river. Whereas if that was a solid blue line, then that would be, you could expect to find water there generally year round. But anyway, oh yeah, here we go. Like this. All right, yeah. So what Carly was pointing out there is as these lines create a point, generally if it's ascending,
The point's always pointing uphill.
yeah,
arrows are pointing uphill, it's water flowing downhill.
right. Oh, okay, just about water. Okay, cool, yeah. So here's a depression in a low area, and this will probably on a topomag. This will look really similar to a hilltop, except that you'll see that it's surrounded by our little lines all pointing in. That's how you know that it's going to be a swampy depression, low area. Oftentimes, too, these areas will be denoted with little dots all around them. I'll show that it's kind of a marshy low area. I mean, this is Western Washington. If it's a low area, it's going to be marshy, so in the woods. Oh, and these lines are called hatchers. Hatch lines, hatchers. Does anybody need more explanation on topography? Okay. All right, real quick, we're going to touch on measuring distance on a map. So often maps are in either two scales, 1 to 12,000 or 1 to 24,000. And what that means is that feet, 1 inch represents ever so many inches on the map. So an easier way to think about so 1 inch is, so if you have a map that is 1 to 12,000 right there, it's super simple. It just means that 1 inch on the map is equal to 12,000 inches on the, 1 inch on the map is equal to 12,000 inches on the ground. Does that make sense? So yeah, so if you're using the map and you measured a distance of 1 inch, that would represent 12,000 inches, yeah, going across the woods. So the same thing for 1 to 24,000. Another really simple way to think for 12,000 and 24,000 is that for a 1 to 12,000 scaled map, 1 inch is going to be equal to 1,000 feet. And for the 1 to 24,000 scale map, 1 inch is going to be equal to 2,000 feet. If you just remember that, that'll get you a long way. So, okay. Yes, and this is a good point. So we rarely rely on direct ratios, and these are direct ratios, 1 to 12,000 and 1 to 24,000. We rarely rely on direct ratios for SAR, because so often when we start doing, planning an evidence search or dropping points on a map, if we're running up to Baker to do a rescue or something, we'll end up just scaling the map to whatever fits kind of the area that we're going to be working in. So it's really important when you receive a paper map as you're about to head out into the field, just go ahead and look at the bottom and see, and for SAR Topo too, it'll tell you what the actual ratio is for whatever map that you're using. But it's important to check the ratio and check the scale. A lot of your compasses come with scales built into the lanyard or built into the body of the compass. And those are only going to be useful for those direct ratio scaled maps. Otherwise, take note of what the scale on the map is that you're actually using. 1 mile is equal to 5,280 feet. 100 feet is 33.3 yards, is 30.5 meters. Quarter mile is 1,320 feet, 440 meters, 402 meters, 440 yards, 402 meters. The only thing I'm going to say about declination is that all maps display somewhere on the map what your magnetic declination is for the area, because it changes depending on where you are. Your declination will change. So every map that you have or use will show somewhere on it what the magnetic declination is for that area that you're in. So, which will be more relevant coming up. But anyway, the last thing I'm going to say is on SAR Topo maps, actually pretty much on any map, there will be these, I don't know if you can see them, but there's these blue orienting lines moving across the map. And if they're not printed directly onto the face of the map, there'll be tick marks around the edge. And you'll want to use those for orienting your compass directly north and south on the face of the map that you're using. But you'll learn more about that here in just a second. So that's it, I'm done.